Hey guys, I'm Jackie Brubaker. I'm an author, a motivational and career coach, and host of That Girl the Podcast. Each week, I bring on a leader in their field to talk about how to stop making excuses and how you can start living your lifelong dream. That Girl the Podcast is based on That Girl the Novel, which is on Amazon to download or buy the paperback of. To find books, courses, and products from our episodes, check out the shop page at thatgirlcoaching.com. You can also follow us on Instagram at Jackie Brubaker and at That Girl the Podcast and our Patreon page. Welcome, Taylor Shanklin, to That Girl the Podcast. It is so nice to see you and have you on to talk about a really important topic. We're going to talk about your story of discovering if you are or not asexual, which is a really hot topic right now. We've got a lot of discussion going on about that. You've lived it. You have a really fascinating story. So let you introduce yourself, because I feel like people always do a much better job than I ever could. So go for it.
Awesome. Well, hey, Jackie, it's good to be here. Thanks for giving me some space to share my story on this topic, because I think it is one that's interesting. So I am Taylor Shanklin. My friends call me T Shank. I am also a podcast host. I'm a mom. I run my own branding agency and do a lot of public speaking on kind of topics of self-improvement and motivation and how to push through challenge. So that's a little bit about me. I live in the mountains in North Carolina. So you see my skis in the back. That is real. I try to get out and enjoy nature and just honestly enjoy life as much as possible. Life is short. So embrace your authentic self. That's the way I like to approach things.
Absolutely. That is what we are here to talk about. So let's start with some of your background. You grew up in a very, very religious community, and let's have you begin kind of your journey with that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I grew up like a lot of people in America grow up, just in a religious family, and grew up Catholic, went to Catholic schools most of my life. Went to Catholic elementary school, and then a Baptist middle school for a little while, and then a Catholic high school. So
a lot right there.
Yeah. So faith and religion and how all of that fits into sort of everything about your life was just a big part of my upbringing, and not in a weird way or anything like that, but just was a big part of, do the right thing, go to church, be a good girl, is sort of, I think, something that we are brought up to know and to kind of make like a whole part of you. So I don't know if that answers the question.
Well, I hear that a lot from people who have grown up in, Baptist homes or Catholic homes. It's the be a good girl. Like I wanted to be a good girl. Like that's a very common phrase that I hear across the board. What did that mean to you?
Yeah. I mean, we're here talking about like sexuality and exploring your sexuality today. So like a lot of it means don't have sex, right? And don't enjoy sex. And just do kind of as you're told. And like I had a great upbringing. Like I have an amazing family, model parents, like, and are amazing people. But when you're in that environment, particularly, and it's like, I don't want to rag on people for their faith or anything like that, like to each his own. That's very much the way I approach things. But for me, what I learned more as an adult in dealing with shame and judgment and really not feeling like I knew my own self very well, I've looked back and thought, like, how much did that have to do with the fact that particularly in those middle school years, you went to chapel as part of your schooling every Wednesday, and hearing things in those middle school years about if you have sex outside of marriage, you're going to hell. And you're in sixth grade and you're sitting there and you're like, Like, I don't even understand what sex is still at that point, but you're telling me I'm going to hell if I do it? Like, it's terrifying, and it can stick with you for a long time. And it's something that I find is damaging, but not often brought to the surface and talked about in our culture, because for a lot of people, their faith and their religion is a huge part of them. And that's okay. But I think there are things about it that it can do to us, especially as children being brought up in those types of environments where, like, you're told that in 6th grade, where you're like, I don't even know what sex is. But yeah, again, like, I'm going to go to hell if I do it. So,
right. So let me not find out anything about it. Because
don't explain the process to me. Just tell me that it's terrible and you're, going to be, smite down by God.
Right. Like, don't think about
it. That's not good.
Yeah. Don't think about it. Don't investigate. Definitely don't watch any kind of sexual anything. Like, you don't know what you're doing, and then just be terrified. So you're brought up this way. This is very much lodged into your psyche. And then you meet your husband. So let's start from there.
Well, we met in high school. So we were both in Catholic high school together. We were friends. And he also grew up in a very religious household, so we're both kind of learning these things in our upbringing. But maybe it affected me a little bit more. I mean, he's a guy, I don't know that it affects men in the same way.
Right.
So we were friends in high school. We really only had a friendship at that point. I'm a year older than him. So I graduated, moved on, went to college. We reconnected later in college. And then that's when we started dating. And, honestly, like, follows sort of a typical pathway. Okay. Meet a guy in college, get married, focus on your careers, get a house, have babies. And so we did the typical thing.
Yeah.
And what has been interesting through all of that time, I mean, we've been together, almost 14 years now, married.
Congratulations.
Yeah, a long time. In those early years, what I think I didn't realize is how damaged I was inside about shame, about sex, even in my marriage, know, and that's something that I think the reason why I wanted to talk about it, why I think it needs to be talked about more, is because I think this happens to a lot of women in particular.
Yeah.
Get married, you're a good girl, you have babies, your body changes, you feel self-conscious about that. And what happened with me is I was in a place, even within my marriage, where I think I felt a lot of shame around sex. And it's like, why? And so that starts to cause issues, clearly, within a relationship.
Right.
And, probably halfway through, I'm starting to think, like, I don't really want to have sex with my husband. Like, why? Why is that?
So when you were starting to feel that way, was that happening in the beginning, or was that happening after kids? Like, because I'm kind of trying to think too, like, what was your wedding night? Like, how was that? Let's start there and then kind of work our way through. What was that like for you? Were you terrified? Were you like, I don't want to do this? Like, because I have talked to so many women who are like, I was terrified. I cried.
Yeah. I wasn't terrified. No. Okay. I didn't cry or anything like that, but I don't know. It's almost like I'm not sure that I felt like the passion that I should have, that you would want to feel.
Sure.
So maybe some of it felt sometimes just like going through the motions. Again, kind of feeling like, okay, well, this is what I'm supposed to do. But remember back when I was younger and I was told that, like, this was a bad thing and you can go to hell. And even though, you hear that, and they did say, as a child, like in church and stuff, like, it's good within the marriage, but then it's very much just about making babies. And so like you have this thing in your head that makes you think this should not be a pleasurable experience.
Right.
And so I think that was something that I dealt with where maybe it was hard to find that much pleasure in it, but more like, okay, this is just something I'm supposed to do now.
This is my duty as a wife.
Yeah. Yeah.
How was your husband feeling? Because he was brought up the same way. Like, was he communicating to you in the beginning of how he was feeling?
I don't think so. I think this was like the silent thing that went unsaid.
Oh,
and I think that's where it starts to create a lot of problems within a relationship if you're not talking about it and you're not being honest. And I'm not even sure I knew what was happening for me and why I wasn't feeling a pull or a drive towards my sexuality.
Right.
And he was, as a man, he's like, I want to have sex. You know,
just you're like, we're ready. We've been ready for a while.
Right. And so then when you're the other party in that relationship and you're like, okay, I'm doing this to go through the motions, but I'm not really even sure like how much joy it brings me. Like that creates a riff. And I think for way too long, it went unspoken. Mm-hmm. And I think that happens between a lot of couples.
Right. How long do you think it went?
Probably 7, 8 years, honestly, before it really started being talked about more, probably because it was really causing more issues between us, and he started getting really frustrated. And then at that point, like we had kids. So that's where you get into the whole, like you're a mom and your body's shamed. And when the kids are young, you're exhausted. Mm-hmm. You're chasing toddlers around.
Yeah.
That doesn't make you feel sexy.
Nope.
So I think there's a lot of little things that start to add up and build on each other. And then one day you get to this point where, and this is kind of what happened to me, where I just thought, we were at a sort of a breaking point, where it's like we don't have intimacy in our relationship in the way that we should, right?
Yeah.
In the way that he desires, and even in the way that I desired, but I didn't even really know what I desired because I was like, I think I was just ultimately confused.
Sure.
Right?
I was just thinking that you must be so confused. Like, is it the mommy thing? Is it we've been married for a long time? Is it we're just going through what is it? Like, I would imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're confused. And I think because if you're brought up in a way in which it's just not really talked about, you don't know what to think. You're navigating all of it on your own through your adolescence. Yeah. And this is something that I'm really working to get ahead of with my own kids now, where I'm like, I'm going to talk to them about this stuff when they are, curious about it. I'm not going to try to hide it and sweep it under the rug. But I think what happens is in our society, in a lot of households, this conversation around sexuality and passion and love and relationships, it's swept under the rug a lot. And so as a kid, you grow up, boys and girls, maybe not knowing what to even think about this stuff. And then you become an adult and you're like, you either figured it out on your own, and maybe guys lead a lot of, nudie mags and figure it out on their own. But girls, I think, often are left a little bit in the dark. Right. And then you realize later in life and adulthood, even within your marriage, after you've popped up kids, like, wow, I don't even really know how I feel about this stuff.
Right. Or, also just thinking about like the pleasure aspect of it. Like, is this even feeling good? How would I even know? And what would I do? Because, a lot of girls growing up will like experiment and, see what feels good. And like, there's so much more opportunity to do that, but there still isn't with some, cultures where it's just like, do not masturbate, do not explore your sexuality, don't do it. Again, you're going to hell. And if you don't even know what an orgasm feels like, ever, you don't know if you're having one. You know, you can imagine maybe that was it. I don't know.
No idea.
Right. So, okay. So when do you start talking to your husband and say, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be feeling here. Yeah. And it just starts the conversation. How did that begin?
Yeah. I mean, I think it began just between us. Like, clearly we were just kind of going through the motions, I think, of our, expected societal marriage and all around happy American family lifestyle, right? We had good jobs, we had kids, we had a nice house, we looked great on paper. And what happens is you often just don't talk about the things that are happening under the surface that really are damaging to relationships. So I think, I don't know, it's hard to pinpoint exactly when, but it was probably 7 or 8 years in when it really started coming up a lot more as a topic of conversation. And that is when, and this probably lasted a few years for me, to be honest, I really thought I was just, and I told this to him, I was like, I think I'm just asexual. And I don't know, I'm not sure why, and I'm sorry, but I think that's what's going on with me. I think I'm just asexual, maybe, and I don't really know what to do about that.
What was his response to that?
I mean, clearly he wanted to help, you know.
He's like, let me help this.
Wanted to see if we could fix it.
I can fix this. I know I can.
All right, let's. How much money do we need to pay a therapist to fix this?
Every guy's like, I can fix this. We can do this.
Yeah, we can do this. I got this. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
No, but in reality, that's we started kind of going to work. He started thinking, I think about okay, how can I be supportive of you? How can I work with you on this? But at the same time, sure, there are those conversations of well, I don't know if I want to be in a marriage when one party is asexual and one's not. And I kind of felt the same way too. I was like, maybe this isn't even the right fit, despite all of the things on paper that say it is. But the biggest thing, and I think the crux of my message for other people, for other couples, for other women who are maybe also struggling with this, is to identify when something like this is going on. Talk about it with your partner, with your spouse, and work together toward the solution, whether it's, no, I'm not actually asexual, and here's what's happening for me internally and maybe in our relationship, and then they work through it. Or you're like, yeah, we really are just on different wavelengths, and we need to figure out what that looks like moving forward so that we can both live happy, fulfilled lives in the way that's authentic to us. So I think it's just stop sweeping the conversation under the rug, because what happens is our sexuality, I believe, plays out so much into other areas of our life. It can cause stress in other areas of our life that maybe we're not even identifying, that's actually the core reason of why you're stressed out, and why other things maybe aren't even working in your life. I think a lot in the human mind and the human psyche is wrapped around sexuality.
Sure.
So when you're feeling like that's not in a good place, it can cause a lot of other things, I think, in your life to spiral, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I was just thinking, just to share a story that happened to me that's kind of in the same ballpark. I was with someone who was Mormon and had not had sex, and we were very much into our 30s. And I was like, oh, so wait, you're like waiting for marriage. Oh, and I guess I just thought, oh, he's so great on paper. Maybe I should just give this a shot. And we were together for longer than a year, but we did not have sex for a year. And
Mm-hmm.
that is so hard to process in a romantic relationship on
Mm-hmm.
every single level. And it will bring you to the brink of insanity because that is such a natural part of having a romantic connection with someone.
Right.
If you're friends with someone, then it's fine. You're
Mm-hmm.
fine. But you
Right.
cannot sleep in the same bed and be messing around and doing everything but that. And there's so much rejection you feel and there's
Yeah,
so much confusion and it really takes a toll. And that's just a
it does.
similar kind of experience that so I can sort of relate. Um,
Yeah.
but it is such a huge part of making a relationship work and making the rest of your life work. It's not
Right.
to say that, you've been married, you have kids, it's been like 7 or 8 years, like, oh, we should be like bunnies all the time. Like, that's not realistic either. Right.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
just not,
There's
that's
also life and like it
right.
takes a toll on you. You have other
Right.
things to do. Yeah.
Exactly. You have stuff to get done. You're
Yeah.
tired and like it's cool. So let's
Yeah.
like schedule that, which I'm all about. That sounds really unromantic, but
No, it doesn't.
let's schedule. So
Yeah.
yeah, no, I can absolutely see how that would bleed into all areas of the life and just get very complicated. Okay, so I'm thinking of women who are listening specifically too.
Mm-hmm.
What was it that you started to do once you started thinking, okay, this might be a thing. Maybe I'm asexual. Let me figure out if I am or not. What did you do?
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to go back a little bit to what you actually just said about that relationship you were in, because you were on the side of being the one who was rejected.
Mm-hmm.
And he, because of his religion, was essentially, quote, rejecting you, right, for that aspect of the relationship. So in mine, I was the one rejecting my husband, and he was the one feeling rejected.
Yeah.
I think this is relevant to that question because it started with me having to recognize and own and hear him that he was feeling rejected.
Yeah.
I didn't want to hear that for a long time. And that was something that was very hard on him. And of course, I mean, looking back, I'm like, God, that was like, yeah, that was shitty of me. I was thinking about what was going on in my head and what I thought about sex.
Yeah.
And getting wrapped up in that and not thinking about his experience as the person feeling rejected and how hard that is to feel like the other person in the relationship who's feeling rejected. So it starts a little bit with ownership of what's happening.
Okay. Yeah.
And looking yourself in the mirror and saying, all right, here's what I think is happening for me, but here's what's happening for them, for the other person, and being open to hearing that and understanding it. And then trying to think through, okay, how do you work through it together? Because at that point, it's not just an issue for you.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, again, a lot of cases, it is the woman. It's not just a case and an issue for them. It's also something where the other person is highly affected by this.
Mm-hmm.
And it is causing turmoil within themselves and within their life as well. And so looking at it as a together issue is really important. And again, I'm just very open about talking about this because I think it's so swept under the rug and it causes a lot of challenges in relationships. I was like, I think we should see a therapist. And I said, I should see a sex therapist.
Yeah.
So after sitting with it for a while and still, quite frankly, just being like, I'm asexual. What do you want to do about it? Like, that wasn't great of me, but like I sat in that space for a while.
Yeah.
Before I finally then did start to really hear him and did start to think, well, I got to find out why, right? Mm-hmm. Why is this? And is this true? Or is this just my assumption? Or is there actually something else that's going on that I learn in working with a therapist where it's like, maybe I'm not asexual. Maybe there's some other thing that's causing either a rift in this relationship or something else going on in my head that's just causing a lack of like desire. So I started seeing an actual licensed sex therapist, someone who really focuses specifically on intimacy issues. And what you said about scheduling it is actually, it's really good advice. And it's something that my therapist said for us to do, you know, at first in the beginning, when it still felt like it wasn't coming naturally. It was like, and she said this too. She was like, just, it doesn't sound sexy. Put it on the calendar, do it. Don't avoid it.
Right.
And like start to work through some things that way. So that works.
It's kind of like working out. It's like,
Yeah.
maybe you don't want to do it, but now you got your clothes on and you're out there, you're doing it. And then you're like, oh, I kind of like this. Like I forgot that I like this.
Yeah.
I can imagine it might be something like that.
Yeah, I think it is. Exactly. And so I think that's why therapists say to schedule it, to do it. And she did say that to us. She was like, I think if you start to get into a rhythm, like you might start realizing like you do like this. But I think like I was avoiding it for so long.
Right.
And so then you get to this point where you're just, I don't know, in a way, like it can be intimidating after you've avoided it so long. There's just all these things that happen in our heads around it, you know, and sometimes a lot of negative self-talk internally about it. And it's just such a human thing to do. Like it's literally the way in which we all exist. So the fact that it's the act of sex itself is something that just is so uncomfortable for people to talk about is funny because it's like, how did you get here, Jackie? How did I get here? Like
something happened
here.
Right.
That's the science of it, you know?
Right.
So,
well, sex is so stigmatized and people, my gosh, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Like you're a slut if you sleep around and you're, like crazy or whatever. There's so many different labels that we put on people and judgment we put on people.
Yeah.
And it's just a very touchy subject in general.
Yeah.
And I'm glad we're talking about it. I love talking about relationships and sex and just like getting it out there too. Yeah. So you're getting therapy. When did it start to click in? Okay, maybe I'm not asexual. Maybe this is just some conditioning that I need to kind of unravel and reprogram my brain to be like, oh, there's a whole life here I'm missing.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. There's this whole thing.
This whole thing people talk about.
Well, and it was frustrating for me because it's this whole thing people talk about and it's this whole thing that people say is awesome.
Right.
And I'm like, why don't I like it?
Like, why me?
Why don't I think this is awesome too? Damn, so like that was hard, right? Like that was really hard feeling like, what is wrong with me for not thinking this is as awesome as everyone makes it out to be,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it was just a lot of phases through therapy, working, like doing the work, right? Seeing a therapist and then doing the homework that they gave to us. It came to with a lot of recognition of, and again, just uncovering, I think, the things of the past and the feelings of shame and guilt and doubt that were placed upon me in that upbringing that I like uncovered because I hadn't thought about that in a long time. But you start to like kind of dig into different areas of your life. And I think I started to recognize that it started a long, long time ago when I was told I was going to hell if I had sex.
Yeah.
And realizing like, oh, like this has been sort of ingrained into me and I didn't even realize I'd taken it with me into adulthood.
Right.
These feelings of shame, right? Around sex. And so I think that was a big part of it. And then other things is I think sometimes there's other things happening in a relationship that then cause the sex to not happen, right? So other things that we needed to work through as a couple, that once we worked through and we were happier with each other, then naturally,
it does. It starts to flow.
You want to do the sex more.
Got to get that sex in there.
Yeah, exactly. Every Tuesday at 7. No, I don't know.
There it is. Are you both still practicing Catholics?
No.
When did that
he
start?
never was. So he actually grew up Mormon. Too. So go back to your Mormon boyfriend. Yeah, so he grew up Mormon.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm just let's just be good people and live a good life and be kind to people. I'm a lot more in that philosophy now. And so I don't know. Yeah. I'm sure some people just think like I'm a hippie now, no longer really going
come
to
over
church
here then.
and talking on a podcast about sex. But it's like, I just believe in being a good person. If your faith is something that helps you, great. Have that as a part of your life. But I also think it's important sometimes to recognize when there are aspects of faith that are really, I think, about controlling people. And that's something that I've had to come to terms with and realize like, okay, I don't like that aspect of what some, religions do to people. So I don't know. Be a good person, do the right thing, treat people the way that you want to treat them, sort of a,
golden rule kind of thing. Yeah. That's the biggest thing.
And I also recognize I'm like, I don't know, there's something bigger than all of us. The universe is bigger than all of us. And I just say, I don't know. Mm-hmm. I don't try to say this religion is right or that religion is right. I'm just like, I don't know. I'm a tiny little ant that's microscopic in the universe,
Yeah. I mean, it's nice. I think we can all have feelings and beliefs and whatever kind of helps us get through this life. But at the end of the day, none of us know what's going on.
Know.
We don't know.
Yeah. So. None of us know. None of us really know. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, this has been very enlightening. I think this is going to help a lot of people who are listening who have had similar experiences or might be going through this right now. I'm so glad that you are out there talking about it, talking about
this is
sex
the first
to
time
people.
I've gotten on a podcast to talk about it. So
yes,
this is
welcome.
Oh, Mom is listening.
Well, it's good. You're just, you're speaking your truth. You're being authentic to who you are. And that is so freeing in every aspect. I think the more you tell your story, the less shackled you feel and the more free you feel. And you just heal over and over and over again. It's amazing. So I'm so glad you could come.
Thank you. No, I mean, I want other people to know that if they are facing this and they are feeling silent about it, that they're not alone, whether you are on the side feeling rejected or you are on the side feeling confused about your sexuality. You're not alone. This stuff doesn't get talked about enough. And so that's my main message today is there is hope on both sides to work through these things.
It's so true. I remember feeling very alone. Like, I must be the only person who's going through this specific experience. And it was not true. I was not alone. But thank you so much, Taylor. It was such a pleasure to talk to you today.
Thank you. Good talking to you as well.